mentioned, I've been working on a new true crime show. I'll tell you more details very soon, but all hour we are speaking to the real people behind the true crime headlines. Our next guest narrowly escaped a terrible fate. It was April of 1969. At age 14, Alice Feiring says she almost became a victim of the infamous dating game killer, Rodney Alcala. He was given that name, dating game killer, after appearing on an episode of the wildly popular TV show at the time, The Dating Game, in 1978. This is him on the show then.
Bachelor number one.
Yes.
What's your best time?
The best time is at night, nighttime.
But what people didn't know was that behind the charm was something more sinister. Alcala was connected to the murders of 8 women prior to his arrest in 1979. However, law enforcement believes that that number could be as high as 130 people. And now this is back in the headlines. Anna Kendrick's Netflix movie, I just watched it, is called Woman of the Hour. It focuses on the victims and the lives this murderous animal took. Decades later, women are still coming forward with their encounters, like our next guest, Alice Feiring. In a recent essay published in The Cut, Alice writes that Rodney Alcala did not kill me. 40 years later, I asked him why. My prison visit to the dating game killer in search of an answer. Here to share her story and more of what she hoped to obtain from him in that prison visit. Please welcome renowned journalist and author Alice Feiring to our show. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's go back to then, 1969, April. You were 14.
14.
You met this individual, and at that time he had the alias of John Berger. You met him outside a bookstore.
Inside of a bookstore.
Inside the bookstore, and he asked to take your picture.
Well, I was in the bookstore buying a book that I'd lost of my brother's. I'm pulling it off the shelf, and it was by Albert Camus, and he said, "Oh, existentialists." And I imagined seemed much taller and creepy.
So instantly you got the creeps from him?
He was a very good-looking man, but there was something about his eyes. They were really, he could go from really handsome to really sinister, and I got that immediately, and I didn't feel comfortable. I would have been safer in the bookstore, but I went to pay and get out. He followed me.
He followed you?
He followed me.
At some point, he convinced you, though, to take photographs.
Well, he convinced me to walk with him, and I was waiting for my father who was getting a haircut across the street, and I had an hour to kill. So, and I'm like 14 years old. I just got my braces tightened. Nobody wants to take my photograph. I am really not pretty, you know, and at least that's the way I felt. And I thought, this is a come on, this is, you know, and I had a sense this was a trick. But he said, oh, look, it was 1969, you have to trust people. And I felt too shy to show him. I did not trust him. And he said, it's really about your coloring, the red hair, the black of, okay, fine.
So he played on this, right? So you felt like, okay, if I tell him I'm not going to go, he's going to think, oh, what are you too good to come? I'm just taking a photo. And you're a kid, you're 14. Let's keep this in mind. So you end up there.
Right. So he says, this is my block. I said, well, I'm not going into your apartment. I'm not that stupid. So what about the rooftop? That seemed safe to me, which is ridiculous. But it was fine, and I was, you know, I was a dancer, and so he had me do certain moves, and he seemed normal at that point.
So you're on the roof. Again, you're 14 years old at the time. You are going through this process. He goes to the bathroom. Yeah. He comes out naked.
Yeah. And at that point, he had given me a pack of photographs to look at before he went to the bathroom, which terrified me. And I was already, how do I get out of here? I was at the door by the time he came out without clothes on.
The photographs are important because if you watch the film, and this is a dramatization of the film, but apparently he kept a lot of these pictures of women who were later discovered to be victims.
They were terrifying.
The photos were terrifying?
The photos were terrifying.
Do you remember them to this day?
I remember them. I remember so much about this exactly. So yes, it was polarized. I remember the look of the apartment. And I put them down. He said, well, this is my work. I'll be right back. I have to go to the bathroom. And I looked at them and I said, you better get out of here right now.
So your mind told you.
It was like, this was not cool. And so there was a police lock, and I had never seen one of those before.
What is it? I don't know what a police lock is.
It is a pole that comes out of the door into the ground, and I had never seen one. And
I'm 54. I still never seen one. So you're at least...
So I was like, and I am not mechanical.
Right.
So he's...
You got the lock open?
Somehow, as he was reaching for me, I got out.
So he's... Oh, wow. So by the time you see him, you run to the door. You've got this device trapping you in. You make it out.
Yeah.
You bolt out of there.
And
then you come back.
Okay. It's like one of those amazingly stupid things that a 14-year-old or a kid can do. But I left my book. And
The book that you'd bought for your brother.
that I bought for my brother, that my father had given me the money for.
Right.
And if I had come back without the book, I'd have to tell him what happened. And I didn't want to tell him what happened.
So you went back to the house, you knocked on the door, and you said...
I said, book, please. I was,
And
book,
he
please.
handed you the book.
And I was,
Ran.
And I... Yeah.
You know what? I mean, all I'm trying to visualize is 14-year-old like, book, please. Was he still naked? He was still naked. When we come back, decades after that terrifying encounter with the dating game killer, Alice went to visit him in prison to get answers. Next. Welcome back. We are back with journalist and author Alice Feiring, whose essay In the Cut details her face-to-face encounter with the notorious serial killer Rodney Alcala, also known as the dating game killer. She was 14 years old at the time. Now, fast forward, Alice, to 2013. You're now 44 years after that encounter. You decided you wanted to go to Rikers Island and speak face-to-face with him. Why?
Well, I think it's really important to know that I had no idea who he was until 2010, when I happened to be watching television at a hotel room. And it said, Rodney Alcala is sentenced to death. And I'm like, that's not Rodney Alcala, that's John Berger.
So this whole time...
I had no idea who he was.
You had no idea. So you left you fled from his home, from that apartment. Yeah. Did you tell other family members at the time about it?
My brother immediately. When I got home, I called him in school and I said, what just happened to me?
Yeah.
And he said, just don't tell mom and dad.
Right. So this whole time you thought the creepy guy named John, you know, I got out of that house and life went on as it was. And then in 2010, you're watching TV, he's sentenced.
Yeah, and so all that night, I'm Googling to make sure. It couldn't have been a serial
Did you
killer.
instantly recognize
I
him all those years
recognized
later?
Him. He had the same hair, kind of curly, and wore glasses. And then I was Googling until I came across alias John Berger, 1969, East Village, done. So he is extradited to New York City for two cold cases.
2 cold cases here.
I go to court to listen and just really don't know why, maybe to pay my respects to the women he killed. I'm in touch with the Detective Wendell Stratford, who really encouraged me.
Okay, so you go to Rikers Island, 2013, and you wrote in your essay, I didn't consider myself one of his survivors. Still, I wanted to know so badly why he didn't kill me.
Right.
Why did you want to know that answer?
Through my talks with Detective Stratford, he really assured me it wasn't that he hadn't stopped killing or started killing, but really I was one of the very few, who had seen him in that state and escaped without at least being brutalized. So if I had thought that, okay, he didn't kill everybody.
Yeah.
So if I was just, and that was, I knew he was never going to give me an answer.
So you go there, but how do you introduce yourself?
I rehearsed this. I was so nervous, especially nervous, unshackled, alone with him in the room. It was like scary. And first he thought I was a social worker who was coming to help him. And then I said, no. And said, well, then why are you here? And I said, well, we met a long time ago. And I said, when? I said, 1969. I said, yeah, that was a long time ago. And I was just wondering whether you remembered. And he said, well, no, but I thought you might because it had an interesting ending. I went back for my book, and then I told him
Did he
what
remember?
happened. He did not, and it's, you know, I thought that you would remember somebody as stupid as I was, but
Did you feel that you were in the presence of evil?
I did feel that I was.
Did you leave the conversation with what you wanted? Because you went back, you went twice.
I went back again, and I went back to San Quentin this time.
Yeah.
I had to do it for a few reasons. One is that I thought I might be writing a book about my experiences and what I learned about him. And also Wendell, because he knew that I had a rapport with him, he said, maybe you could help us find more bodies. And so that's really why I went.
So now this time has passed. What do you hope people learn? Because I know you won't watch the Netflix.
I won't.
And I can understand why. If you've lived through something like that, I would not want.
I've heard great things about it, though.
It is. It's compelling.
Yeah.
It is compelling, but it's TV.
Yeah.
It's a fictionalized version of it.
Yeah.
But in fact, you experienced and saw it firsthand. What do you want people to learn from this? Because you could have kept this story silent. You didn't have to share it. You chose to.
Well, I think that in sharing it, so many other stories come out. Friends of mine, other people who have had really close experiences, and you don't even realize how close they are. And I think it's really important to remember, as much as we want to love everybody, that you have got to earn trust, and you and mostly parents of children, I don't think do enough to educate. They can instill fear, but not really rational. Look, everybody looks like a human, but not everybody is a human.
That's fact. That is true. That is true. Listen, you can read more about Alice's story and other parts of her life in her memoir. It's called To Fall in Love, Drink This.